thank you all for turning up. It's lovely to see so many familiar names, some familiar faces, and some new names and faces as well. This is the opening launch of our collaborative online exhibition with Nuke Collective, called Intention, and we'll go into some detail about the contents of the show and meet four of the artists who are in the show across the course of the next hour. I am, for the sake of everyone knowing what the plan is and feeling confident with that, in the chat I'm about to just share a little schedule of what we're planning to do, who is going to speak, and when we're expecting to speak. So you've got an understanding of that, if that is helpful to you. If you don't want spoilers, then you can also just ignore that post. My name is Kate Grenier. I'm the director of Five Contemporary, and I am really pleased to welcome you all here today. As I've said to a few people as we come in, but I'm going to just repeat it one more time, please keep your sound off. Your camera is up to you whether you want to be visible or not, but if you keep your sound off, it means that we're only hearing the one person who's speaking at any one time. There's a chat that's open. Please say hello to people you know in the chat. Please also, as we're talking, I'd rather not take questions as we go along, so we're not interrupting people's flow of thought as we're talking. But if you have a thought, then put it in the chat and we'll make sure that there's a space, as you can see in the schedule, for 10 minutes of questions at the end, and I can ask anything that anyone has put in the chat as we are going along. Similarly, if you have any challenges or any problems, if something's not working, flag it in the chat and we'll try and make sure that's solved as best we can. We're not hugely technical people, but we'll try and make sure we pause until we've solved something like that. As I say, my name's Kate Grenier. I've just got a little description of myself. I've got shortish curly hair that's just above my collar, got dark black rimmed glasses that are quite round. I'm in my spare room at the moment, which got lots of knickknacks behind me on a shelf, so I've blurred that out so that it's nice and clear who you're looking at. And I'm also occasionally getting a very bright light in my face if I lean forward. So I'm gradually moving myself backwards, as I say. So that's a little introduction to me. I'm just letting two more people in who've just joined. I also have a habit of talking too fast, and I'm going to do my best to not do that too much, particularly as when we record this, and we are recording that, we're going to put a version of this recording online with subtitles on it, and the slower I speak, the more time people have to read the subtitles. So I'm going to do my best with that, but I am a fast talker. So we're here to preview the exhibition, Intention, which is now live and online, and I think I shared initially the link in the chat, but I'm going to share it again so that it's up to you whether you want to watch me. I'm going to share my screen and click through some particular pages, but if you want to and you have the screen to do it, you can also visit the exhibition on the link I've just shared in the chat. Oh, we've got more people coming in. That's fantastic. I've just admitted another person. So I will now screen share my my own page and introduce you to the exhibition Intention. Do a little bit of sort of orientation of it, really, more than anything, because it's an online exhibition page. We've had this online program going since 2017, so long before the pandemic, and it's a really valuable tool for being able to share some of our physical exhibitions and give them a bit of an archive, but it's also great for being able to produce exhibitions that are specifically designed to be online. And that can mean we can connect people from across Scotland. It means we can connect people to work who maybe don't like to visit or find it easy to visit gallery spaces for whatever reason. And so we did a show last year with a group who had been affected, continued to be affected by the pandemic, who are continuing to need to shield, either for illness reasons or because they have long COVID or some other reason. That's an exhibition called Lifelines. And That exhibition taught us that actually there's some real value in online exhibition making for all kinds of people who find access to exhibitions in the physical world difficult because of travel or other reasons. So when I visited the Nuke Collective exhibition that was held in Edinburgh last summer, I learned myself quite a lot about neurodiversity, which I didn't know before, and how that affects exhibition making. It gave me the idea that actually I would reach out to Nuke and talk to Nuke Collective about whether an online exhibition with collective members would be a valuable use of our online exhibition making tool. And thankfully, Tipura and many more members of the collective than we thought would be interested were interested, and I'm so pleased that we have 16 artists in this exhibition, which is a huge number. And this means it's a really rich resource for people to be able to spend time with, click around, look at their own leisure, absorb at their own pace. And I've just spent the last couple of hours doing that myself and spending lots of time with everyone's work, and it's a really joyful exhibition to look around. I obviously, with that many artists, do not have time to show everyone's work in the next 5 minutes, but I would like to give everyone a bit of orientation. So one thing we have learned about this space, what we try to do is make it nice and clean, so it feels like a white cube gallery space, so it's not fussing you with pop-ups and other things that distract your mind. We want it to give anyone the chance to spend time online in a very different way to the way you might experience social media or fussy busy websites that are trying to sell you things. It's trying to be a clean space, but in trying to be a clean space, it can sometimes be harder to navigate. It has these blocks. So we introduced the exhibition at the top here, and it has these introductory blocks that make you feel like you're entering a show and like you would read the panel on the wall that tells you about the show. Where the exhibition space isn't as clear as other spaces is that you don't necessarily know that all these different blocks have a different page behind them. So we just introduced this really nice just explainer. You can click on the square and that'll get you to a different exhibit. So we start with the exhibition introduction pages about Nuke, about intention and the theme of the exhibition, which is one that's been developed in collaboration with all of the members of Nuke Collective who want to be part of the show. And then we've got individual blocks, and I'm just going to, hover over each one or a few of them to show that as you hover over them, the picture goes from black and white to color. So that indicates that you're there, and then you can click on individual ones and engage with the contents of the work. I really invite you to spend some time doing this. And do it on the biggest screen you have, so you can spend a lot of time with them. If you've worked out how to connect your computer to your telly, do that if you can. It looks really good if you can make it big, but it does work on mobile phones as well. So I'm just going to click on one. This is Louise's work, and of course now it's gone. Hasn't clicked through. There we are. I think that's because we've got quite a lot of people in the meeting. It's a little bit slow. But this is Louise's work. I'm clicking on this one because this was a piece as I clicked around today, but that I felt was really this selection of work was really great because it embodies what we're thinking about in this exhibition. Some of the artists in the exhibition are making work that is nothing to do with neurodivergence. We haven't said that it all has to be about your experience of being a neurodiverse artist. Others have made work about other conditions that they're also living with. And some have been directly relating the program of their work with that idea of communicating online about and with neurodivergent experiences. And so, yeah, this is a sort of example of what one of those pages might look like, with some examples of work. There's also, you can click on these, which are sounds which you can play. I'm not sure how well they'll actually play through Zoom, but you can play conversations. There's occasionally some of these things are little animated GIFs. and the words around them help guide you through the exhibition. We've also in some places, as I scroll down, got embedded films. This one has an embedded film that's on a mobile phone format, portrait format, and then another film that is on a landscape format. So there's lots of different things you can click into in each um, uh, person's work and really, really engage with it. We're going to now talk to, just pull up my little notes again. We're going to now talk to invite some of the artists who have been happy to share their thoughts about their work into the opening so that we can have some conversations. But just before we do that, I just want to invite in Zipporah, who is our the founder really of Nuke, and who does so much work to pull it together. And I wonder if Zipporah, you could. I'm going to stop sharing for a bit so we can maybe see you big, but if you can unmute and just say hello, and maybe that will pull you up.
Hi.
Yeah, that means you appear larger on my screen. That's nice to see you. I wonder if, as the person I first reached out to about this exhibition and the person who founded Nuke Collective and also Door on the Wall Arts Access, could you help me describe what Nuke means really by neurodivergence? That would really help everyone sort of set the scene of understanding this exhibition.
Sure. So neurodivergent describes people whose brain process information differently from the majority. So it is an umbrella term. It can cover quite a wide range of conditions. So kind of what people classically think of as people who are autistic or dyslexic or dyspraxic, people with ADHD. Um, but it can also include other conditions like bipolar or Tourette's, CPTSD, functional neurological disorder, just anything that fundamentally affects the way that the brain makes sense of the world. We all have our brains at a slight angle, seeing the world slightly differently from other people. Oh, you're on mute.
Yep, got there. Thank you. That's really helpful just to give everyone an understanding of like the massive range of experience that a term like neurodivergence encompasses. Um, and that is something I certainly learnt when I came to your physical exhibition last summer in Edinburgh. And I just wondered if, obviously, we've now gone through this really interesting process of developing this exhibition alongside members of Nuke Collective. And I think every member of the Five Contemporary team would be able to say they've learned a lot about how to better communicate, but also how to better design space or online space for people with, as I say, it's an umbrella term, so it's quite tricky, but people with neurodivergent brains. And I guess I wonder if that you've had any reflections on your experience of the online exhibition making, and whether there's anything that it's made you think about, or anyone from the group has said to you that it's made them think in a particular way.
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot from this. We've never done an online exhibition before. Um, and I think this has really made me think about the power that online exhibitions could have for neurodivergent people. It allowed us the freedom to slow down. It allowed us to, when it became clear, actually, do you know what, we need more time for this, you were able to say that in a way that, like, if you have all the thousand moving parts of a physical exhibition, you're on that train and the train's going to get to the station with or without you. Um, it's been really interesting for me seeing all the different artists' pages because, um, we are a really diverse group, both in terms of the way that our neurodivergence manifests, but also, in terms of we've got performers, we've got writers, we've got visual artists, we've just got such a huge range of folk now. And it was really interesting seeing a different kind of exhibition. you can go on people's page and they've got videos and audio, and some people have, mostly pictures, some people have a lot of writing. And that's been really lovely to see when people have that freedom to not necessarily have to produce one piece that goes on the wall of a white box, what they come up with. So yeah, I think I would definitely love for us to do more online stuff in the future.
Great. That's great to hear that it has helped you guys as much as it's been a learning experience for all of us. And I think then there's a third group of people who will benefit from this, which is members of the public clicking in to see it. And I really do hope people encourage people they work with, other artists, people they know, because I've certainly learned a huge amount from seeing the work, and also just enjoyed it immensely. There's some brilliant pieces that people will hopefully really benefit from seeing in this show. Thank you so much, Tapora. That's really nice to see you. We'll invite you back in a bit as an artist to talk about your own practice. But in the meantime, a little bit ahead of schedule, but I think we're okay because it might take us a while to set up. Could I ask Eleanor and Helen to join us and unmute and say hi so they can appear?
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Eleanor. Hello, nice to see you. And I also think we've got Helen Bowden
Hi
here.
there.
There's Helen. So that will help people see the both of you. Thank you so much for both joining us online for this opening. And I will do a little screen share as I ask you these questions. But I just wanted to ask if either, I don't know who wants to go first, but if each of you could tell me about your work. I'll just go back onto there's so many screens open. There we are. We can see, yes, we can see the exhibition page again. I might actually both happen to be, because your B surname's right at the top, which is nice and useful. Helen, I wonder if I could start with you, because Tipora has just mentioned that there are many different people making many different kinds of work in this exhibition, and you're principally really a writer. I wonder if you could tell me just a little bit about how you work and how you ended up being involved with Nuke, and what the work you've put in the show is there for, what's about.
Sure, yes. Hi everyone. I'm a poet and socially engaged artist, and I write poems basically about place and identity, and there's a couple of them in the exhibition, one which I will read in a moment or maybe a bit later, very short, rather than talk about it, which is the closing one in my poetry collection, A Landscape to Figure In, which plays with the terminology of different art mediums and genres. And the other one is a poem from a new sequence. And they kind of, I actually think everything I write plays around with tensions between things like flow and structure and speech and writing and movement and stasis. And then I thought maybe by definition, poetry deals with things that are in tension anyway, and sometimes resolves them and sometimes doesn't. And so that's what I've been playing around with. Became involved with Nuke a couple of years ago. I have identified as neurodivergent really since coming out of lockdown. Working from home really suited me, and I was in conditions that were actually comfortable for me for the first time, and going back to doing things in person was pretty difficult. So that's what brought me to the collective, and the idea of a peer group of people who are working and may well have very different experience, different conditions, but have a sort of understanding. It felt like a real kind of homecoming or tribe, rather than trying to function as the neurodivergent person who did need longer than she admitted to herself or to people who were commissioning her or whatever. Shall I just read the poem now, or maybe Eleanor wants to?
No, I think if we can understand your work through listening to a poem, that would be fantastic, and then I
Lovely.
can bring Eleanor in.
So this is called Har, St. Michael and All Angels. It was actually written in Fife when I was at the Big Tent Festival a few years ago. But it's not about Fife, it's about family graves in Yorkshire. And there were weird kind of Hari-like conditions, which is odd for somewhere that's quite inland in Fife, as inland as you can get. Har, St. Michael and All Angels. Ground is air, is earth, is mist, is soil, is light, is loam, is haze, is bone, is breath, is foot, is voice, is lung, is home to their remains, their flesh made word, beneath names and dates fixed on York stone. Do you want me to say something about the images, or is that the next
Yes,
question?
no, I think why not? Let's just have a little look at these
Let's
pieces.
have a look at this.
It's nice how the show comes together. It's beautiful to hear you speak the poem, but then to see it written next to the images, I think has
Yeah, and I actually love that. So the photograph, so as I said, the poem just sort of came to me almost complete, which is rare for me because I'm a real tweaker and twiddler and editor. But that was just one that came out more or less complete. And then since then, I've been back down to the graves and been photographing them. So they're kind of developing moss and ecologies of their own, which they didn't have initially at the point which was closer to the deaths of my parents in 2007, 2008.
yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's a very um it's very speaks very much of a moment, the whole piece together, the poetry next to the imagery. Helen, Eleanor, can I ask you if you would unmute and just I'll click through to your exhibit, and I wonder if you could tell us about your work, just introduce it very quickly.
Yep. So my work in this exhibition is from an ongoing series of cyanotypes based on photographs in my garden. And my garden's a real refuge. It's a real sort of place of relaxation and rest. Because I have ME, which is a chronic illness, and I'm quite often needing to rest. And the garden is just this really beautiful place. And it's also, I think, in some ways a political act in our society to just sit still and not do anything and just observe things. And so yeah.
That's great. I'm just scrolled down a couple of the images that you've taken. And what's your sort of process with making them? They're cyanotype, are they?
Yeah, so I take a picture with a macro lens and then I get that printed on acetate and then coat the fabric or the paper with a cyanotype formula and then put the acetate on it with glass and then expose it with sunlight and then rinse it. And then I usually go in, like on this one, I've gone in with different acrylic paints to really play with the color. And sometimes I do that. Sometimes I leave them just as the blue and the white.
Yes, there's some more further down, I think, that are the blue and the white imagery. Thank you so much. So I guess this is a question really for both of you then, because what was interesting about both your work and why we asked you to join this together in this discussion was it felt to me that both of your work has a very strong sense of place in terms of Helen's relation to that one site, that one particular piece, the grave sites. And Eleanor, obviously, because you are spending a lot of time at home, your home is your muse, really, your subject matter of necessity more than anything else, I suppose. But I'm interested to see how that very specific sense of place, how did you find that translating that into an online space or to communicate it in that way as opposed to putting it in a gallery? Does it feel different, or did it actually just feel very much the same as maybe having a gallery?
I think for me it felt very much the same because I've already translated this three-dimensional reality into a two-dimensional work. So I mean, obviously it's nice if you can see it in person and see the textures of the fabric and everything, but it's not that different, I think.
Did you find that actually to photograph it and to get those textures of the fabric was quite important? Or, sometimes when you photograph work,
Yeah.
can't tell what the medium is. You know, it could be a photograph or it could be a photograph of a painting, and yeah.
It's certainly something you miss when it's just a photograph on a screen because it'll look different in different lights, and it'll catch the light in different ways. So there's definitely something that is going to be less so online, but then it opens it up to a wider audience
Yeah.
as well. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
And how about you, Helen? Was your, I don't know if I can click back through very easily, but was it really like more like editing a book, or how, considering you make a lot of poetry publications, how did that work? Or you're still muted a little bit. Yeah. Can you unmute? Is that possible? Oh, Helen, you're speaking without us being able to hear. No worries.
I am so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I don't miss what you're saying.
I'm so sorry. I will rapidly repeat what I was starting to say, which is picking up on something that Eleanor just said there about having already kind of changed mode or something. In that it occurred to me that my writing, and possibly all writing and visual art about place, is already at a remove from what it responds to and what it represents. Um, so this didn't seem that different to writing by hand or work processing or submitting a manuscript off for publication, but it was oddly also more freeing in some ways. I found it quite an organic process, despite it being very digital, in some ways the opposite of organic. So I initially picked poems I liked that a couple of contrasting poems that I liked that addressed the theme, but then I also thought about work that would co-present with images that I already had, because I'm not a visual artist, so the images that Kate's just clicked past of the gravestones, you can keep the page where it is down below, is a kind of archive I'm photographing as time goes on of the weathering of these stones. So it was lovely to be able to bring that to this, which page publication doesn't. Um, and will see these two pictures here. The second poem is it's about the Braidburn watercourse, which flows from the Pentland Hills to the beach at Portobello, changing its name. I stay about three-quarters of the way up it towards the Pentlands on the bank. And a couple of years ago, I was involved in a socially engaged project to walk the whole watercourse and write about it. So I was thinking about things like the flood prevention scheme and structure. So my photographs here were more for documentation or as an aid memoir for me because I was commissioned to write poems after that. So the kinds of photography, and I'm not a professional photographer in any way. The photographs serve different purposes for the two poems there, and then there's embedded audio. So it seemed nice and quite freeing to be able to join different forms together like that, and it seemed to supplement the writing for me. I
Great.
love books
Yes, me too.
and I love live poetry performance. But this was just an opportunity to play around with things in a way that you wouldn't, and I learnt a lot from it. And I hope I've loved seeing the other artists' pages, the little I've seen so far. So yeah, I hope people get as excited about this as we've been.
Great. Yeah, no, I do too. And I think, yeah, that all leads nicely
Yeah.
onto
Can I just, sorry, add one more thing,
yeah,
Kate?
yeah.
Apologies. Which is that I'm a walking artist and my writing is quite embodied and comes out of daily walking practice. Often I edit when I'm walking and I've got that rhythm rather than at my desk. So that was a kind of switch. Not an uncomfortable one. It was a nice thing to be able to do. But my initial creative process and way of being in the world is actually quite different. And I'm not very technologically adept. I'm a very late adopter, adapter of anything that comes out.
Yeah.
So I was interested in how that contrast was highlighted in this exhibition.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And there's another contrast too, I think, and it's embodied in both of your individual practices, but also both of your individual lives, in that it was interesting, Helen, you talking about the COVID lockdowns providing you with a freedom that you, or like an experience you'd not had before, of being able to be at home and retreating and realizing actually there's a lot of challenge with engaging with the world. Whereas Eleanor's experience is to be at home of a different necessity, and I suppose it's very different. And I just wondered, in both your cases, and I don't know who wants to speak first, how other networks, whether it's working with the other artists on this exhibition, or whether it's Nuke, or whether it's any other form of social media you might or might not use, help with that engagement with the world, and whether this show provided a different one, and whether that was beneficial or not. I think you've almost already answered that, Helen, anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, I should also say I felt very lucky in that, I do live in walking distance of the Pentland Hills, and I wasn't homeschooling, and I wasn't ill myself, and didn't lose anyone close to me. COVID was very inequitable like that.
Yes.
It enabled me to see how normal life, to which there's been a rush to return, didn't support me. Just I'd been thinking about that, and there's a lot of online poetry journals, so which is a good way of making poetry accessible to a very wide audience. So it felt a little bit like that. And that poetry works really well on Zoom. You might not agree, having heard me, but you can do things that you can't do in a room. You can use chat. Chat can have creative potential. You can write a collaborative poem and things like that. So I've almost forgotten what the question was, Kate.
It's about social media or internet connecting and through digital means, I suppose.
Yeah.
And
that is so ADHD, sorry. Yeah, I enjoy using social media. I think so far, and touch wood, it's always been a force for good rather than ill for me, and that ability to connect with networks, and through the Scottish Women's Autism Network too,
Right.
and the poetry community, so that you can work with people who aren't just across the Forth, they're in different continents and things, and that's lovely.
Yeah, fantastic. And how about you, Eleanor? Has this exhibition or the Nuke Collective otherwise been a very useful tool for you to reach out from the four walls of your house?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not completely housebound. I don't want to give that impression. I do go out sometimes, but I'd say I'm about 60% housebound. So I have a lot of people I see mostly online, and also I've moved around a lot, and so I have friends in lots of different countries, and so exhibition like this, for example, like my mother's here from America and my sister is here from America.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
Yeah, and my next door neighbor is also here from next door. So yeah, really nice.
And that's such a positive thing about online networks. And I think we can all feel a bit overwhelmed by the sort of bigger networks, the big social media, but actually online networks where you connect, like you said, that Helen is a Scottish Women's Autism poetry, so it's very, very specific about a group of people who all have a similar experience. So I'm sure that Nuke has a similar benefit to many of you. And many of the artists exhibiting as well. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Thank you, Helen. Thank you for being in this conversation. I'm going to swap us around a bit, and we'll come back for questions at the end. So yes, if I could ask if Sipora and Jenny could unmute and say hi, and then they will appear.
Hi.
Jenny, hi, nice to see you. And we've met Sipora already, and this time she's speaking as herself as an artist, which I think is, really important. The amount of work she puts into Nuke and putting that going. I think it's great to be able to highlight your practice, Sipora, as well. I'm going to click back and also screen share again so that we can pull up Jenny's work. And I'm going to ask you, Jenny, first, if you're okay to introduce your practice. We're back on the main page. If we just wait for it to connect. There we are. And we'll
I'll go
scroll
right to the
down
end
and
'cause I
find Jenny. Are you near the bottom? I can't.
other end of the
There you
alphabet.
are.
Oh, that's yes.
There she is.
That's the other me. Yeah.
Glowing in the limelight.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, with the hand-painted wallpaper.
Okay, that should have clicked on, and we'll just open now. So this is Jenny's work. I'll leave it at this
It's
piece, I think.
Panda Pops or something, James. It's really no, it's bubblegum flavored bars. It's the most photogenic drink that way, but it's hideous. If anybody ever needs a drink.
Amazing. So could you introduce your practice very, very sort of succinctly? I know it's a really big challenge often to ask people that.
Yeah. Well, this is part of my this is one element of my practice, which has been a revelation to me, which is a kind of small form of performance and dressing up. But I have been working with a drag artist called Leo Faringer to identify the dreams that I had and the things that didn't come true that I thought might have come true. So I also have ME, and that took place, that kind of took off when I was in my late 20s and was in a very different job and was doing very well, had just bought my first step in the housing ladder, all sorts of good things were happening, and I was walloped with an illness that completely sent my life off into a different direction. And this particular body of work is me kind of mourning for the life I thought I was going to have, but I didn't want it to be an absolutely miserable experience either for me or for anybody else. So choosing to work in what Leo and I are describing as drag adjacent. What I'm doing is not drag, but I'm working with drag as a concept because it's an incredibly safe space to work in, which was my learning. I had known, I mean, I've always loved drag and playing with gender because I'm non-binary. So that kind of thing has always spoken to me. But I hadn't realized how important it is to use to work with drag as a safe space to literally try things on.
Yeah.
And to try out new worlds and new ideas. But it makes having that drag element makes everything just that extra bit sparky and spectacular and fabulous. So these are the things I thought may have been in my world that didn't happen, but it's with knobs on. It's absolutely like proper dreaming stuff, which is why they're beautifully coloured and they're beautifully photographed. And again, I trained as a photographer, so this is a step out of my practice and a kind of very interesting metaphor for chronic illness, in that I allowed somebody else to be in charge of the images and gave up that control, which anybody with any kind of neurodivergence or illness knows that control is one of the things that you lose quite often. So I worked with Louise Kerr and Kyle Hamilton, or I may have got their surnames the wrong way around, who are fantastic photographers and post-production artists, to create these incredibly shiny, almost like magazine cover type images of what my life might have been. And in a glorious way, because although I am definitely dealing with the loss of a life I don't have, the process of doing it was utterly joyful.
You can tell
because
that through the
I work with
photograph.
amazing people, and I think it shows.
It shows, yeah.
And it gives me a chance to talk about the things that I didn't get to do, but also hopefully when other people see them, because these images have been seen in a gallery previously at the Methven in Forfar, by being really upfront about what I didn't get and what I hoped I would be. I find that other people respond to that. If you're honest, other people respond to your honesty.
Yeah, I bet it really it chimes with so many people. I'm sure everyone's, perhaps also the more you've been through life, the more that there might be a response to that what might have been question.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things, although I'm responding as a person who has a chronic illness, it could be anything, and when unfortunately it's not so easy to do online, but when I was working with the Methven in Forfar in Angus, I came in, I did little residences every now and then, and people would just come and tell me their story. And there's all sorts of reasons that the thing you thought you were going to be doesn't happen.
Mm.
And I was really moved that people felt that it was okay to tell me what had gone on for them, and why, you know, which bit of the which picture made them think, oh God, yeah, that could have been me.
Absolutely.
So that's
Yeah, they speak very universally whilst being very personal, which I think
Yeah,
is always
yeah.
one of
And I
those
think
things
the
that
more personal you are, weirdly, the more universal
Yeah.
it becomes.
Absolutely. To bring Sephora in on this, I think I'm going to just click through onto your site now, because I think there is a really strong parallel with what you've presented. So we have here at the beginning of your show a piece that is part of your very focused attention embroidery work, which is fantastic. But your exhibition is also really about what might have been in the main piece of work that you created, which is a bit further down. There's a beautiful bit of writing which I encourage people to come in and see, about explaining what's important about your embroidery practices and pieces. But if I can scroll down past them and let people look at those in their own time, there was a piece you wanted to make for the show. Would you be able to share that and how that came about?
Yeah, my exhibit is 3 existing pieces from the Museum of Monotropism and a very long essay about why the piece I had intended to have finished for this exhibition is not in fact finished. And I kind of I was almost not going to include it, but it was James that convinced me to. And I think he's right. I actually think it's sort of important because the piece was supposed to be called Just Flagging. It currently lives only as a concept sketch and a very early panel that's going to be part of it. And partly it's that I find myself, as I write emails to Nook Collective members, going, just flagging that, you know, such and such a thing is happening. And so that's where the name comes from. But I also do slightly feel sometimes that I am flagging. It's about it's about the tension between like caregiving and creativity. But I think it's also about masking, actually, now that I've had time to kind of reflect on it. It's actually quite an autistic experience, maybe. But the idea of it is that these are the little like mantras that I kind of find myself saying to myself every day to try and get me through the day. Almost like a little vocal stim. And then on the reverse of it, it's the kind of the opposite statement, which is kind of sometimes how I feel when I'm low. And it's weird for me to talk about this. This is like an area that I've never really talked to anyone about before. So going all in on an exhibition on it is a bit strange for me. But I think it sort of felt relevant that this piece that I was trying to make about the fact that I find it so impossible to to make any kind of space for myself was sabotaged by the fact that I was unable to make any time for myself to work on my practice. Like it was supposed to be done by now, and you know, fully photographed and things, and I have just been so completely consumed with the looking after of Nook that this is where it's living at the moment.
I'm so pleased you
Sorry
exhibited
about
it
that.
though. I'm so pleased and you know, well done, James, for encouraging you, persuading you, cajoling you into doing it, because it's really strong to be able to share that, particularly in the context of this exhibition. And I know you and I talked a little bit about it, and about what you need to make sure was finished was the writing about it. So something was finished. So you didn't feel that you were just putting in some sketches. And I think that's you know, very, very wise to have picked a thing that you can say, no, this is finished. The description of why it's not finished is finished, and that's fine, and I'm happy with that. And it speaks to all of those things we're all talking about, with the challenges of whatever experience, condition, or mental makeup, I guess, you're living with. So it's beautiful. And there's a film as well that people can watch. I won't play it now because it'll mess with the Zoom. But yeah, no, thank you for sharing it. I'll zoom it up to these now. There's also a really interesting collaboration or connection between your work and Jenny's work about these statements and just putting them out there. I think that's really important. I think, you know, there's a strength in that. I don't know if that's something, Jenny, you could sort of come back in on, sort of talking about those statements that you put next to the photography, because the photography is really strong and bold, but without the statement, it could mean all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I hadn't seen the Tzipora's flagging piece until we had a little online email discussion about let's look at each other's work before we talk this evening, and it's incredible just the similarity, and that always makes me feel better. I never feel bad if I see somebody that does something that reminds me of my work. It always makes me feel so much better. I feel much less alone when I see people doing work that I can relate to. But I work a lot with short text, and I think similarly to Tzipora, it's if there's a phrase in my head, it usually means I have to think about it. And so I work with very, you know, for short sentences, and I didn't want to have, in the original exhibition, I didn't want to just have the little white label that sits next to a picture, because when those images were originally shown, they were on 2-foot long banners, so that you couldn't stick a label next to them, and I just didn't want to do that. So I wanted to create something that could exist as a piece of work in its own right, but also to they were exhibited on a separate wall, so you had to look at one to connect with the other. They weren't put together as they are at the moment. But I also have postcards that I use to open up conversations, and just I wish I had them now, because one of them says, "I'm doing the best that I can," which I think, for, you know, just for tonight, and for the courage in sharing something that isn't finished.
I'll have that as a post-it note above my desk,
Oh,
completely
wow.
by coincidentally.
Oh, well, I'll send you a postcard, and it could be a solid one. But it's the kind of things that we just, you know, I've got another one that says, "This is all a bit much." And it's just that, what you were just saying about you're trying so hard to make your own work and be true to what you're doing, and then everything else goes on. And I think one of the things that non neurodiverse people don't always understand is the energy that it takes just to survive in the world. Means that actually, even with all the energy in the world, you're already running to catch up, because everything else, you know, everybody else is not having to worry about, is this too noisy? Is the light too bright? Are there too many things happening at once? And so we're always running to catch up with everybody else, and I think we're always running to catch up with ourselves and our ideas, and not having the space to fit everything in. And if only we had, like, we could rule the world if only we had the time to do all the things that we think about.
That's brilliant. Absolutely. One beautiful way to sort of end that particular discussion between you both. I hope that you get to talk more about that, because there's a potential for so much to come from that. We said we'd make sure that the last 10 minutes gave people a chance to ask their own questions. You can do that by putting a question in the chat, and I can ask those out to any of the artists. And I also would say that if people want to just speak the questions themselves, then the best thing to do is I will try and take this off and try and make sure I can see everybody. It's a sort of put up, you can click in a little, one of the symbols at the bottom, which I think is the react one. Yes. And then you can raise your hand. If you click on the react thing, you can raise your hand just to make sure I don't miss you. The other thing you can do is turn your camera back on and sort of wave frantically if you'd like, and I'll try and find you if you want to ask a question directly. We do have a question from La, just while people are thinking of the questions, and it's for Eleanor, and it's in the chat. It says, "Eleanor, I know you are involved in performance work, and I always feel that your cyanotypes are performative. Is that a direct response to some of the restrictions in your life since your ME?" quite a big question, but yeah.
Wow, that's a really good question. I might have to digest that for a little while.
Yeah, it's in the chat if you want to sort of read it through. We could come back to you, but
Yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like I still do performance work, but it's more like recording stuff and making videos and things like that. Um, so yeah, maybe.
if there's anyone else who has any questions, then it's a lovely comment. I'm so moved by the willingness to be vulnerable. I'm encouraged and inspired. I absolutely agree with that. It's so easy to be to feel that the mask has to stay up, and it's great to have a space where that doesn't have to happen. Any other questions people have, or I think the other thing is comments. It's always very welcome for people to comment, just if they're feeling something or thinking something.
I had another question for Eleanor,
Go for it.
if she doesn't
Poor
mind.
Eleanor, she's been quizzed.
Sorry. As that in your bio you say that you and your partner are currently creating a sci-fi trilogy, which is such an undertaking. And I was wondering if there was any crossover with your practice and the sci-fi trilogy.
With my cyanotype practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, none at all. It's like completely different.
Separate.
Yeah, because like I've even thought like to try to visualize the characters we're creating. I don't think I want to do it. I think I want to commission someone else to do it because it's not really how my artistic brain goes. Like my artistic brain needs something that's really there in front of me to work with. Um, so yeah, they're completely different, which is nice. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a vacation from visual art.
I said it in the chat too, but I really enjoyed your work because it's really reflecting on what's discoverable in your immediate surroundings. And so I keep looking around the room being like, that could be really beautiful. I could take a photo of that and turn it into something really nice.
That's what I want. I want people to zoom in on their immediate surroundings. And, some of the pictures I'm making are of what people call weeds, but they're so beautiful. And look at them. Excellent.
And that comes back into the conversation we were just having about that you can make very personal can then become quite universal. The fact that you might be making it because you spend a lot of time in your home doesn't mean that others who might be out and about all the time and frantically desperate to be more at home can't then get some inspiration from the back of the train seat they're staring at, or something they spot in the world around them immediately. It's very personal. Lots of support for weeds in the chat. I want to add myself to that. La, you've got a question. You've raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering with Jenny's work whether or not with posing in other people's worlds and wearing a mask that envelops your whole body, have you found subsequently that that's enabled you to go into spaces that maybe you wouldn't have had the courage or confidence to go into before that body of work?
I think one of the things I did do before I did the photographs was I had a session with a movement coach. And I think that was the absolute epiphany thing for me, because one of the reasons I trained to be a photographer was I hate getting my picture taken, and there are all these pictures of me scowling and my shoulders and tension. And when Leo and I went to there's an amazing wardrobe. It's a warehouse of wardrobes in Dundee. It's an amazing woman who does work with film and TV, and she very kindly let us loose in this place. And Leo took pictures of me wearing the gowns and the outfits we were going to use, and they're dreadful. And I looked at those pictures and just thought, I'm going to blow this. I'm going to completely mess this up if I don't learn how to just be comfortable. And I'm fine being me. As soon as I pretend to be somebody else, that's just dreadful. So I paid for a movement coach to come and spend a morning with me, and she literally at one point had her hands on my pelvis with permission, kind of going, "You do this, maybe you should do that," and made me lip sync to Celine Dion songs and all sorts of absolutely excruciating stuff. But I grew about an inch at one point because she was showing me how to stand, and that's the thing I remember. And when I'm in a kind of challenging situation, that's the bit that sticks with me, is actually this is my body, and I can, and it's, you know, I can be bigger. And I think that, and again, weirdly, the only other person who trained me how to do that was a drag king, a friend of mine who does drag king workshops, and she teaches you how to take up space, like a stereotypical bloke. And if somebody takes my seat on the train,
Oh, for me, Jenny's paused.
that
Oh,
sense of,
we lost the end of that last sentence, Jenny. Can you repeat it? You're just talking about taking up space on a train and doing this.
yeah, if you're on a train and somebody you know, sticks their legs in your space, I immediately channel what I learned at my drag king workshop, and I, you know, open my legs and I open my body a bit, and I take it back. And so there is, yeah, just like it's performing space in a way. So definitely, but having a woman called Jane Bradshaw as a movement coach for half a day, and I got all the really embarrassing, excruciating stuff out of that, you know, over with before. The first photo shoot we did is the one of me wearing a pink leotard, pretending to be Jane Fonda. And I'd never ever worked with these photographers before, and that was our first experience of being together in a gym in Arbroath, which somebody very kindly let us use.
Amazing.
But it's just so, you know, it's so ludicrous that I had to somehow learn not to be self-conscious.
So maybe we all need a drag king class in my life.
It's wonderful. If it ever happens again, I'll book you in. It's utterly brilliant. I look like David Tennant after a hard night in drag. If you give me sideburns.
That's fab.
Probably more information than you need to know.
So fab. I like giving people to time. So if there's one more question anyone has, we've got about a minute or so left. Lovely comment.
But without the cringe, nothing happens without the cringe.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. I think the cringe is very important.
Embrace the cringe.
Mhm.
That could be
Yeah.
another great title for the next show.
Yes. Bring on the cringe.
Bring on the cringe. Thank you all very much for being part of this. Do find some time to spend time with the exhibition if you haven't managed to do it. It's really rewarding. Thank you very much, all of you. There's a comment about vulnerability in the chat, which I agree with completely. The vulnerability people are able to show, I think that's because the group is so supportive. I also think you know, want to congratulate James and all the energy he's put into this on behalf of Five Contemporary, because he's really shared a lot with the rest of the team, all of us, while we've been juggling lots of other projects, and has clearly learnt a lot from working with you all, as I have. So thank you very much. We'll make sure this eventually goes online. It takes us a little while to subtitle it properly, because we do like to do it properly and not just use the stuff that you get auto-generated, and then this conversation itself will also be online. In the meantime, share this with everybody, and make sure people come to the exhibition. It's the lead exhibition in our online archive, but eventually it will drop down the list, but it'll always be there as long as we can keep the coding up to date. So it means it's a great archive and a resource for everyone to share their work whenever they want. Thanks all very much
from Nick as well for putting this together, and for working so supportively with all the artists.
No,
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
I said we've all learned a huge amount, and I've loved working with everybody. Thank you very much indeed.